والله يدعو إلى دار السلام ويهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم.
Islam. Islam 101.
Bismillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi amma ba'd. Welcome back to another episode of Islam 101. And this episode is a continuation of our previous episode. I'm your host, Abu Usamah Adh Dhahabi. In our last episode, we left off dealing with the issue of being compelled. When the Muslim is forced and when he is compelled to do something. We've been stating over and over that the religion of Islam has the flexibility that addresses and deals with the needs of the human experience. Whatever the Muslim finds himself confronted with or faced with in his life, you can rest assured that the religion of Islam has given him a way out, has addressed that issue. So this is also the case as it relates to ad-durura, or being compelled to do something. Before we get into the explanation of who determines what is a durura, who has the ability to determine what is a necessity and how to deal with it, I would just like to share with you an incident that took place in our religion to show you how this particular concept has been dealt with in the religion of Islam. There was a companion by the name of Ammar ibn Yasir. May Allah be pleased with him and his mother and his father. They were one of the early vanguard of the religion of Islam. They embraced Islam at the beginning of the call of Prophet Muhammad. But because they were weak and they were oppressed, they had no tribe, they had no one to protect them, to protect their money, or to protect their lives. So they were taken by the disbelievers, by the non-Muslims, and they were persecuted. To the point that they killed the father and they killed the mother. And then when they came to the son, they asked the son, now what do you have to say about Allah? What do you have to say about Muhammad and his religion? So that boy began to curse Rasulullah. And he subtracted himself and freed himself from Rasulullah and the religion of Islam. So they let him go. The boy went back to the Prophet ﷺ and he informed him of what took place, which was a proof of his faith. He said what he didn't believe. He only said it because he wanted to live. He wanted to save himself. So he went back and he said, Ya Rasulullah, those people killed my father, they killed my mother, and then they were about to kill me. So I cursed you and I cursed your religion and I freed myself from the religion of Islam. The Prophet told him, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if they grab you again and you find yourself in that position again, then do the same thing that you did before. Curse the religion and curse me. If you are compelled to that level and that degree, then Islam allows you to free yourself from that particular situation. So that goes to show that the greatest crime in Islam, as we've been saying consistently on this program, the greatest sin is al-ishraku billah. For a person to fall into polytheism, to say that Allah has a partner, or to ascribe any partner or form of worship to other than Allah. But yet, Islam allowed the man to fall into this when it came down to him facing the issue of should he live or should he give up his life. Another example of that is the eating of khanzir or swine and the intake of intoxicants or any meat or food that is not permissible. If it is a question of life or death, Islam does not accept the concept. You cannot give a blood transfusion or accept a blood transfusion. You have to die before that happens. That's not the religion of Islam. Islam is more flexible than that. It's more open to deal with the reality of the existence of people and the conditions and the variables that present themselves in the people's lives. As it relates to the durura or compulsion, if it is a small issue that a person has the ability to determine for himself, then he has to do that. He's the one who determines that. As Allah said in the Quran in a number of ayahs, the human being, the individual, knows best about himself. بَلَ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا. Every human being knows what's his situation. So in the month of Ramadan, if a person is sick, he has a migraine headache, he has a high temperature, high fever, he's suffering from some type of sickness, he's not feeling well, no one can come to him and say, you must fast, you have to fast. He himself knows his own situation. So Islam allows him not to fast in that situation. So if it's a smaller issue connected to his own person, he has the ability to do so. But if it is a major issue, it is a major issue. He wants to purchase a house on riba. He wants to mortgage a home, usury, for an example. And he says, I'm compelled to do it. Then in a case like that, he has to take his issue to the scholars of this religion. Explain the details of his issue, and then the scholar is the one who will determine, yes, you are compelled or you are not compelled. That's the first 2 points as it relates to ad-durura. The second or the third point as it relates to necessity, and this is a very important point, and there's a rule that's connected to this concept and this principle. And that rule says that the necessity is going to be determined, or you can do it only according to the amount or the need. And I'll give you an example of that. Ad-durura tuqaddar biqadriha. You can only fall into that thing. You can only do it according to the actual need. You can't go beyond the call of duty. For an example, we gave you the man who was stranded in the desert. He comes across carrion, a dead animal that's in the desert. And it happens to be swine. Swine, if it is alive, is not permissible in the religion of Islam. What if it's dead? It's even worse. But because the man is afraid that he's going to die, he's compelled to eat from it. So what should he do? He should take enough of it to eat only to last him to the next point. He shouldn't sit there and fry some of the swine, and then he takes other parts of the swine and he makes it in another way, and the third part of the swine he boils it, and he makes a delicacy of the swine. No, he only eats enough to have his life sustained to get to the next point. That is the meaning of that particular principle. So if someone is compelled to fall into something, then he only does enough of it that is required to get the job done. And I like to give an example of that in the circumstances that we live in particular in the US and in the UK. Riba or usury is a major crime and a major sin. And it is not befitting for a Muslim to make it something that is insignificant or something that is small. It is not permissible. It is from the major crimes. And the smallest example and the smallest level of usury is a terrible example that Rasulullah gave us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's terrible. It's a big crime. So in our countries where we come from, if you drive without insurance, you're going to get in trouble if you get stopped by the authorities. So therefore, out of necessity, what we have to do is we have to get insurance to insure our car, which is not permissible, but we get the smallest and the lowest form of insurance. We don't go beyond the call of duty. Get insurance for myself, insurance for a third driver, the top-notch insurance. I get enough insurance, what they call the liability, and that's it. That is the example of what we're trying to make clear to you. Now, if a person has another child who's driving his car, then obviously he can get the third-party insurance. But it's the point and the concept that we're trying to get across. Before we go on to the third point about the halal and the haram, is there any question that any of you want dealt with here? Inshallah, anyone?
I had a question about the necessities. What are the necessities? And actually, there's an example in relation to what you're saying about the insurance. That maybe a guy who has a daughter and she does not wear hijab, and he say you gotta take it step by step, and she doesn't want it, so I can't really make her wear hijab, and then she wants to drive a car, so she has to pay the insurance. So it's a necessity to pay the insurance. What about the necessity of religion?
Concerning, this is a good point, Akhi Ahmed, concerning the issue of the necessity of praying and the necessity of wearing the hijab and the necessity of holding on to our religion. As it relates to the religion of Islam, no one has a choice when it comes to issues that Allah has commanded us to do. No one has a choice. You don't have the free choice to do the salat or not to perform the salat. As it relates to the obligatory salat, you have a choice to leave off the nawafil or the sunnah, and we explained that already. So issues like the hijab or the woman's garb that she has to wear, this is not something that she can look at as being a small issue. Someone may find themselves in an environment, though, where it is said to that particular lady, if you wear the hijab, then this is going to happen and that's going to happen. That can happen. That can happen. And it's similar to that companion that we mentioned, Ammar ibn Yasir. If the lady finds herself in a situation like that, we won't allow you to live here if you keep your hijab on. We won't allow you to travel from point A to point B if you don't take your hijab off. Then in issues like that, she has to, if she has the time and the ability, she has to take her situation to a scholar and explain what is going on. But I would advise that the Muslims should always hold on to the religion, because whoever fears Allah, Allah will make a way out for them. But there may be real situations that people are confronted with in which that individual may have to do something that is not permissible. It may be the case, but we have to have a level of awareness, a level of taqwa, God consciousness and fearing Allah, and we can't be too quick to acquiesce and to apologize concerning our religion. If it was a question of a religious man, for an example, allowing the people to have his wife take her hijab off or to travel, then I'm not going to travel. He shouldn't travel. But let's say that it is a trip that he can't afford not to make. Then he has to look into the situation. Al-Islam opens the door. If something becomes restricted and difficult on the people, Al-Islam opens up and it makes it easy. But this is an angle and a particular chapter that we have to be careful in. You have a question, Akhi? Any more questions?
I've got a question about halal or haram. There is a proverb that love knows no borders. And some people say that love is a gift of our Lord. But sometimes sometimes love be either haram or halal. What is Islamic point of view on that?
Concerning the halal and the haram, permissible and impermissible, is not something that is just connected to the worship of Al-Islam. It goes outside of the worship of Al-Islam as well. And it goes into the mu'amalat, our regular dealings with each other. For the example that he just gave concerning love, Islam addressed it. First of all, Allah is the one who is responsible for the hearts of all of the people. He guides whoever he wants to guide, and he doesn't guide who he doesn't want to guide. A person is a Muslim, and then Allah can cause him to go outside of the religion. A person is a non-Muslim, Allah will cause him to come into the religion. So the hearts are with Allah. He changes them the way he wants to change them. That's the first thing. We're going to stop now and bring this segment to a close, and we'll deal with the issue of love, inshallah, in the second segment. So try to be back and view in with us for the second segment of the halal and the haram in today's topic and discussion.
Islam 101.
The Prophet ﷺ have informed us that we should not obey no one on the account of disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the superiority is to Allah's command. So if the husband tells his wife that I want you to shake hands with my colleagues, with my business partners, no, even if it leads to divorce. If the husband says to his wife that you have to party with me, with partners and so on, no, you have to take your hijab off, no. By any means, communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Definitely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows your language, and He will be very happy to answer your dua.
Islam 101.
Welcome back to Islam 101. We left off dealing with the issue of love and the correct type of love, the halal love and the haram love. The hearts are between the two fingers of Allah, the Most High, and He changes and He turns the people's hearts according to what He wants. So love is something that ultimately goes back to Allah. He causes an individual to love people, and it causes another individual not to love other people. Part of the fitrah, or the natural disposition that we've been created with, is the natural feelings that people have towards their mothers and their fathers and their siblings. The natural disposition that a man has to love his mate, or the woman has to love her husband. This is the fitrah. If the fitrah is contaminated, then the person is not going to love his mother. And how does the fitrah become contaminated? His environment. Maybe the mother was abusive to that particular child. The father was abusive. And as a result of that, the love is compromised. In any event, the Prophet told us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, love the person who you love moderately, because the day may come when that individual becomes your ardent enemy. And hate the person who you hate moderately, because the day may come when that enemy, he becomes your beloved, or a person who you love tremendously. And that's how some of the companions were. They used to hate Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prior to becoming Muslims, and then after becoming Muslims, they loved him so much and honored him, respected him so much, that out of respect and reverence, they wouldn't even look at him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that hadith shows us that our love, the halal love, is the love that's moderate. It's moderate. And the hatred that is from Islam is the hatred that is moderate. The love that is moderate will allow you to tell a person who you love, who's doing something wrong, hey, that's wrong. It will allow you to be fair and just in dealing with the situation. But if you are a person who's going overboard in your love for that individual, then you're going to be oppressive. I love Jesus Christ so much, for an example, that I start to say he's the son of Allah, al-ghulu. Or I love my sheikh, my teacher, so much that it's clear the truth is not with him, but I'm still going to follow what he said because it's ghulu, my love for him. And also, in contrast, your hate for someone can be so great that you will not accept or embrace the truth from him because he's your enemy. This is not an Islamic concept. So that's one issue as it relates to love. Another issue concerning love in terms of the halal and the haram is that it is not permissible to love what is not loved by Allah, nor is it permissible to hate what is not hated by Allah, the Most High. My parents are not Muslims. I love my parents, no doubt about that. That's natural. I can't help that. And if Islam told me I can't love my mother for being my mother or my father for being my father, I wouldn't be a Muslim because that's not natural. But what I can do is I can't love the disbelief that my parents are upon. So I have to hate the disbelief, but to love my parents is permissible. Allah told Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Innaka la tahdi man ahbabta, walakin Allah yahdi man yasha." O Muhammad, you do not guide those people who you love. Your uncle who's a non-Muslim, your grandfather who's a non-Muslim, your relatives, your people, your uncle in this particular case. You can't guide those who you love, but Allah guides who He wants to guide. So the ayat establishes, the verse establishes that Rasulullah loved his uncle who died and other than Islam, and he was sad. So this ayat was revealed. So I can love my mother and my father for being my mother and my father, but I cannot love what Allah doesn't love, and that is their disbelief and the things that they do that go against the religion. The last point that we want to make concerning the love is, what is not permissible is that love that a man may have for a woman who is not permissible for him, or the love that a woman may have for a man who is not permissible for her. It's not permissible for a woman who is married to have love in her heart for another man. It's not permissible. The man that she has love in her heart for should be her husband, or her father, her uncles, and maybe the companions and the righteous people. But to love another man with the desire of wanting to be with him the way she is with her husband, this is not halal. This is not permissible. This is from the major sins in Islam, and this comes as a result, again, of a person's fitrah being corrupted. So there is a proper love and an improper love. We don't have the love that takes you overboard. Again, the issue of the sirat al-mustaqim, being on the straight path, being balanced, not too far to the right, not too far to the left. Sardar, you have anything? You have another question? Faddal.
In Islam, woman is to cover her hairs by a special veil. But in some countries, authorities require that on the identification documents, women should be with unveiled hairs. What is the Islamic point of view on that? Can it be considered as a necessity to do such kind of photos?
That's a good question. Nick comes from Russia, actually, and some of our Muslim sisters in Russia are dealing with this issue where the authorities insist that for identification, the Muslim woman should expose all of her head. Everything, she has to expose it. But we want to make a point concerning Nick's usage of the language. He said the veil. The veil in Islam is called the niqab. And the niqab is what covers the face, and it's highly recommended that the girl does that. If she's of her age, it's highly recommended that she covers her face. But it's not an obligation. That's the veil. That's the niqab. As for what is on her head, that is called the khimar. The khimar, the thing that covers the head. So the veil is not the thing that goes over the head. Concerning the identification in the Muslim country, or other than that, I know a sister in Florida who was allowed to take her driver's license. The first one was with the niqab, with the veil. And then the world has changed after 9/11. So now in that particular state, they said to that lady, you have to take your picture without the niqab. You can keep your head covered, but without the niqab. And she went, and she's fighting that right now in a court of law. What does Islam say about that? Is that a need or necessity? First of all, pictures in the religion are not permissible. To take the photograph in Islam is not permissible. We're not going to get deep into that subject, but there are times when it becomes a necessity. In order to travel, a person needs a passport, so he has to take a picture. In order to get licensed, he has to get his license, so he takes a picture. But as it relates to the Muslim woman, is it permissible for her to take off her head scarf, her khimar, and expose her head? I say no, it's not permissible for her to do that. It's not permissible for her to take off her head scarf. And if she feels that it is a necessity, then she doesn't make that decision on her own. She takes that situation and she explains it to a scholar in detail. And she allows a scholar to say, yes, this is a necessity. Because you want to travel from point A and you want to make hijrah to point B. And you won't be able to do that for your religion without doing what they're asking you to do. So go ahead and do it. I would advise every woman at all costs, almost, to keep your hijab on. Keep your hijab on, and when there's a real need and a real necessity, you make sure that you take it to a scholar and you explain your situation in detail. So I say no, she shouldn't take her headscarf off that is covering not just her head, but it's covering her hair, her head, her neck, her ears, and it comes all the way down over her bosom as well. If a person, for an example, the Muslim girl, she wants to travel to the West, she comes from a Muslim country, she wants to travel to America, for an example. She's going to get a passport. She has to take the pictures for what is known as the INS. They tell her, okay, you can leave your hijab on, your headscarf on, you can leave it on, but you have to expose the ear. The ear for the Muslim woman is from her aura. It shouldn't be seen by anyone except the men from her family. But she won't be able to travel. She won't be able to do the things that she wants to do without showing that particular part of her body. Is that permissible? Issues like that are a bit more easier. They're lighter. They're easier. As for her taking off her hijab because she wants to go to swim in the Red Sea or something like that. She wants to go to have a party somewhere in the earth. She wants to go somewhere to waste time somewhere in the earth, and she's going to take off her hijab. Then we say, no, this is not permissible. And she should avoid it altogether. Because Al-Islam does not open up the door, nor does it give a concession or rukhsa for something similar to that. Okay, if you guys have any more questions, we have time for one question.
Yeah, what's the difference between a concession and a necessity?
Brother Ahmed is asking, what is the difference between a concession, a rukhsa, and the durura, or something that is a necessity? The rukhsa is the religion giving a person the ability and the chance to leave alone something that he wants to do. For an example, he has to fast in the month of Ramadan, but if he's traveling, he has a concession to leave off the fast. The person is normally required to pray standing up, but because he lost a leg, because he has a pulled muscle in his back, he has been given a concession or rukhsa, he can pray sitting down. He should pray standing up normally, but because it's not a obligatory prayer, it's not an obligatory prayer, he has a rukhsa, and it's permissible for him to pray the sunnah prayers or the nawafil prayers sitting down. That is the rukhsa, the ability that an individual has not to do a particular thing or to do a particular thing. For an example, men are not allowed to wear silk in the religion. The companion of the Prophet ﷺ, Ka'b ibn Ujra, radiallahu anhu, when he was making the Hajj, when he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he had some lice in his head and he had a condition on his skin that caused him to itch, Rasulullah allowed him from amongst the companions to wear the silk because it was a rukhsa only for him in this particular situation. So the rukhsa is when the religion gives you the green light to do something that normally you shouldn't do, or it gives you the red light. It gives you the red light to prevent you from... The rukhsa is the thing that Islam allows you to do that normally you shouldn't do. And the necessity is something that you are allowed to do because you're compelled, you're forced, you have no other option, you have no other alternative. So that's in general basically the difference between the two, inshallah. So concerning the issue of what we're dealing with here, the halal and the haram, we just want to reiterate again that the first point is that making something permissible or impermissible is the haqq of Allah. It's the right of Allah and Allah only. And the second point is if anyone delves into this area, in this arena, then he has set himself up as a partner along with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third point that we want to make concerning these issues is that everything in the earth, in terms of the food and the drink and what we can wear, everything in the earth is permissible. Everything is halal. The origin of everything is, it is permissible until the proof comes to say and to show that it's not permissible. The proof from the Quran or the proof from the authentic sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, with that being the case, we're going to explain this issue in more detail in the upcoming episode so that the people will come to understand what was asked already in the previous episodes. Is there a book that explains all of the halal and the haram? Well, if you know some of these principles and some of these points, you will see that many things are included, and we'll deal with those in detail, inshallah, in the upcoming episode. We're looking forward to seeing you. Wassalam ala man ittaba al-huda.
Islam. Islam 101.